everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of IncaTalk, our new series about the Andes before the Spanish conquest. I'm your host, Peter Frost, and joining me online from California is visual anthropologist, fellow Peru enthusiast, and co-host of this series, Maren Elwood. Hi, Maren.
Hey, Peter. I think what our viewers need to know is that we started these little expeditions when I was down in early 2020, right before COVID started. And here you and I find ourselves now having to continue our passion for the Inca culture and for these various ruins around, doing it via Zoom, and hoping to God that one of these days I can get back down there and we can resume our little adventures.
Our last episode featured hundreds of cut stones that were carried from a stone quarry near Cusco all the way to southern Ecuador in the far north of the Inca Empire, a distance of 1,500 miles. Now here we are on the same route those stones were carried along 500 years ago in the town of Lima Tambo, west of Cusco, where this extraordinary Inca site still stands near the modern highway from Cusco to Lima. It's called Tarawasi.
Okay, right now we're in Lima Tambo, the town on the way down to the Apurimac from Cusco, on the highway to Lima nowadays, but once the highway of the Inca Empire. Because what we're standing on now is an Ushnu. It's a feature that existed all over the Inca Empire, a kind of stepped platform where the Incas performed ceremonies. So they had a ritual and religious significance, but also political and imperial significance, because the ceremonies that were conducted with the elites on the top of the platform, like performing these ceremonies, and the people a little bit lower down the totem pole, gathered around, witnessing these ceremonies. Which included sort of libations and things being poured into the ground, all kinds of things. But the idea, besides the religious, spiritual purpose, was the political purpose of demonstrating, the presence of the Incas, the power of the Incas, their control over the landscape and the people around them. So they were, political, religious ceremonies, and these places that varied a lot in quality and size and all the rest of it. This one is particularly, the stonework is incredibly beautiful, beautifully made place that, it's nowadays it's one of the many Inca sites around this in region where people come sometimes. But we're here, we're on our own. There's nobody here, and that's the kind of visiting you can do around here. If you forget about Machu Picchu and go to some of the, you don't have to forget about it, but there's a lot of other places where you can go, where you can really feel the place. It's not swarming with tourists at all. In fact, there's nobody else. There's just us here, and it's an incredibly impressive site. So that's one of the things I love about living here. So the top level of the Ushnu, the platform, probably where the real sort of ceremonies would have been conducted, on the top here. Huge niches in the walls, big enough for individuals to stand in, which is probably what was going on during the ceremonies. There might have been guards, or who knows, we can't really, we can only speculate about what they were actually used for. But they're enormous. We see this in some other places too. With it, and there are 12 of them. Count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 huge niches with big stone lintels, beautiful stonework, and a curious carving on the top stone on the end of the corner, which, don't ask me what that means. I don't think anybody knows. We don't find that much low or high relief carving on Inca stonework, so that's a little detail. It might even be post-Inca, it might have been done more recently, who knows. But anyway, the whole thing, an outstanding example of an Inca ceremonial site on the main highway where we're standing. This route was part of the main Inca highway from the far north of the Inca Empire all the way to the far south, more than 4,000 miles. A highway that in some places was wide enough for 4 modern trucks to drive side by side along it. Not everywhere, but it's one of those amazing world phenomena, and human phenomena, I should say.
And Tarawasi was not only a major Inca site on the Royal Highway, it is also a historic location in the history of the Spanish overthrow of the Inca Empire. Some of our viewers may know the story of the Spanish capture, ransom, and subsequent killing of the Inca Emperor Atahualpa in northern Peru in 1532. The following year, the Spanish conquistadors marched down this highway, virtually unopposed, to take control of the Inca capital of Cusco. Then, on an extremely steep mountainside known as Vilcaconga, high above Tarawasi, one of Atahualpa's generals ambushed the Spanish advance party and had them in a dire situation until reinforcements arrived just in time to save them. It was the first of many major battles between Spaniards and Incas.
I'm standing inside one of the niches around the base of this Ushnu that I've been talking about, this Inca ceremonial platform. And the whole, most likely where I'm standing was where perhaps Inca warriors, gods, perhaps even the Inca emperor himself was standing on top here conducting a ceremony. The point of the ceremonies was to reinforce the Inca imperial presence.
And look at the size of the upper level of the Ushnu. It's 12 huge niches along the front, 8 on either side, all evenly spaced, absolutely classical proportions throughout the world, and space on top for dozens of people. Impressive ceremonies and pageantry would have taken place here, and the Inca emperor himself, and probably his Koya, his principal wife, would have officiated these ceremonies when they were traveling through here. Today it's not so impressive or colorful, it's just me and Maren.
If you look around the niche that I'm standing in, you can see that the stones are damaged. That's the kind of damage that appears on these stones. Now, I'm not a super expert, but what looks to me like has happened here is that these stones have been burnt. They have been exposed to high heat. That was possibly, this is total speculation, but it's quite likely to me that what we're seeing here is actually traces of deliberate destruction conducted during the time of the Spanish colonial era, where they were, they had campaigns to stamp out the native religion and to remove all traces that they possibly could of it. And this might, be, the remains of a campaign, they call the campaigns of extirpation of idolatry.
So taking a step back, let's look at this massive retaining wall that forms the second tier. It's actually not the lowest, outermost level of the Ushnu. That's partially destroyed. What survives of it is massive, but it's so far out from the central platform that we can't see it from here. What's really prominent is this Spanish hacienda built on a corner of the second tier. It's probably stood there occupied for a couple of centuries or more, but now it's in ruins. It certainly hasn't held up nearly as well as the Inca foundation it was built on. When you look at this wall at the corner below the hacienda here, you can see why. Huge, perfectly cut and fitted stones that have never been rebuilt or restored or even maintained. They've stood there through time and history and earthquakes, and they haven't shifted an inch in 500 years. We did a precarious reconnaissance inside the crumbling ruins of the hacienda and found this water channel, which I believe is an original Inca feature. The Spanish landowners took advantage of it by building their mansion right over it, giving them running water right through the central courtyard. What tells me it was part of the original Inca design is right here, just below the edge of the Inca retaining wall. We can see the original water outlet built right into the wall in the classic Inca stone cutting style.
So, Peter, isn't it amazing that this Ushnu is still in existence and intact along this major modern highway?
Well, it is, Maren, and there's actually hundreds of them along. The Incas built these things all over the place on their highways, and there's lots of them on the main major highway from north to south. Many of them still in quite good condition, one or two of them quite famous as well.
And wasn't it fun to find those low relief carvings on some of the stones? I wonder to this day what those meant.
Yeah, that is curious, but you know what? I'm not convinced that those are actually Inca. They might well be done in more recent times, so I don't want to read too much into those things. But yeah, it's interesting to find those there.
Anyway,
Yeah.
okay, so for our viewers, up next will be Saiwite, which is an amazing site
Yes.
with several Ushnus on it and amazing carved stone and so abrazos.
Abrazos.
Abrazos,
Big
by the
hugs.
way. Yeah, abrazos, by the way, means hugs in Spanish.